Hey everybody, this is Tracy Malone from narcissistabusesupport.com. Today we're going to be talking about senior sociopaths. Senior sociopaths with Donna Andersen from Love Fraud. Senior sociopaths, she will define as anyone in the cluster B. So that includes narcissists for those of you who are wondering. But we have them where a senior sociopath could be in a relationship. You and them could be in a relationship. Or the sociopath could be in a relationship with your parent or someone else that you love, and they're ramping it up. They're neglecting your parents or whoever it is. And then we have the others. There's so many situations, but we're going to talk about two today. The other one that I really wanted to bring out here is when you have a narcissistic parent that is getting older. And again, same thing as if you were in a relationship or they were in a relationship with your mother. It's just a big cluster of how do we help the other non-narc parent. So Donna's going to give us lots of advice, and her new book is out now. So I suggest that you go and look it up. It's so full of data. It's so full of information. So let's get started and welcome Donna. Hi, Donna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tracy. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Before we start talking about senior sociopaths, which is our topic today, would you be so kind as to talk to my audience about who you are, what Love Fraud is, and anything else you want to share with them?
Okay. Well, I am the author of lovefraud.com, which I founded in 2005. So we've been on the internet for quite a while. And my objective with Love Fraud is to teach people how to recognize and recover from sociopaths. And by sociopaths, I mean someone who could be diagnosed with a cluster B personality disorder, which the American Psychiatric Association includes antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, histrionic personality disorders, plus psychopathy. And the reason that I put them all together is because they're all equally bad news, for those of us who end up involved with them. And the reason I got into this is because I married a sociopath. My ex-husband took $250,000 from me. He cheated with at least 6 different women during our 2.5-year relationship. He had a child with one of those women. And then 10 days after I left him, not 10 days after we got divorced, 10 days after I left him, he married the mother of the child, which was the second time he committed bigamy. And I was like, my head was spinning, and I was talking to my therapist about this. As you can imagine, I needed some therapy, and telling her all his outrageous behavior. And she said, he sounds like a sociopath. And sociopath, what's that? And I started researching it, and he fit the description. And so I realized that, this had happened to me. I was a journalist and a business owner, and I figured that if it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. And sure enough, as I started talking about my experience to people, they're like, oh yeah, I know someone that happened to. And so all this was going on, but nobody knew what it was, and nobody was talking about it. So for that reason, I launched lovefraud.com.
And you have a book, Love Fraud. You have several books before the book we're going to talk about now.
Yes, my first book is called Love Fraud, and that tells my personal story. The full title is Love Fraud: How Marriage to a Sociopath Fulfilled My Spiritual Plan. And because there was a whole spiritual aspect to this journey. So the book reads like a cross between a true crime novel and a spiritual journal. It's like amazing. And then after that, I wrote Red Flags of Love Fraud, 10 Signs You're Dating a Sociopath. And the purpose of that is to tell what the warning signs are if you're dating a sociopath or you think you might be dating a sociopath. And then that has a corresponding workbook that goes with it, the Red Flags of Love Fraud workbook, which helps people to, it asks questions and has checklists, so you can take a look and see how you may have gotten into this situation and what your vulnerabilities may be. And then I did the 4-part Best of the Love Fraud blog series, which is essentially a collection of my I've got like 4,000 blog articles at this point. So there's so many, people can't find them. So I wanted to make it easier for folks to find the most important articles.
Wow. And you were one of the first people I like found, and I remember reaching out to you, and I was deer in the headlights, and yet our stories were so similar. And I was like, oh my goodness, this woman knows what's going on here. And you've helped so many people. So thank you for doing what you've been doing for so long. You probably are like around the longest of anyone I've come across. So you know your stuff. And today we're going to talk about senior sociopaths. And this is your new book. I'll hold it up, although it says that it is a advanced copy, but it is Senior
Oh,
Sociopath.
well, I got one too. So that one doesn't have a sticker on it.
Well, the label on it. And
Okay.
so really, the reason that we're talking about this today is because narcissists get old, right? And so they can be abusive in so many different ways. And we have to learn that different situations can come along, that these can be in so many different aspects of our life. So I want to like, what made you decide to write about this after you've written about so many other things?
Well, as I was learning about antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, narcissistic personality disorder, I kept coming across these statements in the literature, the scientific literature, that the mental health field tends to believe that antisocial behavior burns out, that sociopaths burn out in their 40s. And I was like, well, this makes no sense. My ex-husband was older than that when I met him. Although, of course, he lied about his age. First he said he was 49. Then he said that he couldn't bear to lie to me, and he had to tell me the truth that he was actually 51. Actually, he was 55. So he's, even when he's telling me that he's, admitting the truth, he's still lying. So and after I divorced him, he went on to scam even more people. And I was hearing the same thing among the readers. I was hearing from lots of people who had gotten involved with sociopaths, and they, were with people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they kept saying that this person is not getting better. So what I wanted to do was actually research it and document it and see if I could gather up some data on this. So I did a survey of my Love Fraud readers called the Senior Sociopath Survey. And I specifically asked them about their experiences with people who they believed were disordered and who were also age 50 or older. And 2,120 people completed the survey. So I have got lots of data. And actually, I did two surveys because I was gathering all this data. And as far as, what the people actually did, I call them the index individuals, they're the ones that we're talking about here. And then I realized that I didn't ask a question about like, how do you recover from this? So I did a second survey asking people, what exactly they experienced and how they recovered and what advice they had to offer. So the book does two things. First of all, it defines and tells exactly what folks do who are disordered at this age. And then it offers advice on how to deal with them and also how to recover from the experience, which was all provided by the survey respondents.
And I love the data in your book. I love the data in all your books. I mean, it's factual. It's like ding, ding, ding. And you're like, oh, I get it. I have had so many clients that are over 50 and married to, dating, broken up with, all kinds of different relationships. And I know you cover a lot in the book, and I want you to explain some of the different places we can find them. So not only a relationship, but other ways, different types of narcissists. But when we're done with that, I really want to talk about the romantic as well as I have two different case studies, two different friends / clients were like, get me this answer from her. So we have sort of the romantic, like you can be in a relationship with a narcissist over 50 and you're over 50 or whatever. And you can also have it where your like parent gets into a relationship, like a widower that gets into a relationship with someone, like they're really good targets. So we'll talk about that. And I also want to get into having a narcissistic parent
Mhm.
Always had that, where we talk about that, but it gets to a point I'm finding with my clients, as well as in your book, which was great, is that the people that are dealing with this, the narcissists, as they get older, say it's dad and mom's the nice one. Dad stops the children from seeing mom. Dad, it's just this control factor that mom's 85 and dying and she needs help, but the narcissist is like, no, I got her to myself. So tell me some of the situations before we go into those scenarios about where else can we find them besides romantic partners?
Oh, everywhere. uh, Essentially, yeah, just, look over your shoulder. I have multiple chapters in the book. The first chapter I talk about just what we're speaking about is dating relationships, where somebody starts dating someone who is over 50 and is disordered. But I also have a chapter on marriages, and many people married while young and are finally, after 20 or 30 or 40 years, figuring out what was wrong with their marriage, and it's the partner. I mean, all this time they just knew something was wrong and couldn't figure it out. So I talk about marriages, both long-term and short-term marriages. I do talk about the parents, which I think actually is probably the most important chapter of my book, in the data that I found out about that. I also talk about sociopaths in the family, relatives, in-laws, grandparents, and how they create havoc within the whole family. Then I talk about sociopaths as neighbors or work colleagues, because plenty of people realize that their boss or a coworker is disordered, or the neighbors. And that section is kind of interesting, because the abuse that the disordered people dish out to their neighbors or just acquaintances is usually pointless. It's like, why are they doing this? I mean, there's no purpose to it whatsoever. So anyhow, those are the categories that I talk about, but the vast majority of the survey respondents were in some kind of a romantic relationship or marriage with the senior sociopaths. And so that's, most of my data is about that.
Yeah, again, I think the parent, for me and my clientele, and I've certainly heard of neighbors, I've heard of landlords, I've heard of all kinds of scenarios.
Right.
But let's talk and focus on that romantic piece to start off with. So what kind of tactics does someone see? Like, we have two different things, right? Scenarios are they're married and they're figuring it out now, or they just got divorced and they're dating them, or they lost someone and they're dating them. So in those scenarios, what kind of tactics would people see? Because they'd be different from being married to them for 40 years versus I just met them and they're love bombing me.
Right. Well, let's talk about meeting somebody first, because that's chronologically usually what happens first. And essentially, it's all the same tactics that I wrote about in the first book, or the second book, Red Flags of Love Fraud, 10 Signs You're Dating a Sociopath. They engage in the love bombing. They even at this age, they say, oh my goodness, you're the person I've been waiting for all my life. I mean, my ex-husband said that. He was 55 years old and had all these women. And all of a sudden, I'm the one that he was waiting for all his life. And so people hear that all the time. Then, of course, there's the traits that you could see, like, how charismatic they are, and how charming and how much fun. So those are all, and they also tend to be really sexy. I mean, sociopaths are highly sexual, and that continues after age 50. So you have these traits that when you meet someone who's, charming and sexy and fun and interesting and thinks you're wonderful and is love bombing you, it seems like you've met the perfect person. Because, who doesn't want to date somebody who thinks you're wonderful and is sexy and charming and everything like that? So then what happens is that you need to watch out for the other traits. And probably the easiest one to spot is blaming, because sociopaths never take responsibility for anything. Everything is always somebody else's fault. Nothing is ever their fault. And that's one that you'll see early on, because there's other traits like lying, but you don't know that you're lying, until, after the fact, until you start to put things together. And then, of course, they're grandiose and those types of traits as well. So, but the thing is that in order for somebody to be considered a sociopath, narcissist, antisocial, you need to see the whole picture. Just because someone is charming and sexy and thinks you're wonderful, that doesn't make them a sociopath. But if they're charming and sexy and love bombing you and think you're their soulmate, and then also blaming and lying and the pity play, that's a big one, trying to make you feel sorry for them. If you start to see this whole picture, that's something to be careful about.
Just like danger, Will Robinson, right? If they start to control you, belittle you, it's not like they just come out very subtly, but I really don't like the way you blink, or could you clean this better? Or they start to pick, where everything in the beginning, as you said, you were the best thing in the whole world, and now you load the dishwasher wrong. And so it's looking for those inconsistencies to you're the best thing in the world to pick. That's the starting of the devaluing. And if you think about the controlling, they tend to isolate you.
Oh yes,
those are the things that we have to make sure people understand, that no matter how in love you are with them, if they try to say, oh, come on, be with me tonight, I really want to see you can see your family another day, right off the get-go, they are isolating you. And if you fall for it in those little examples, they will have you hook, line, and sinker.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And it does start to creep in. I mean, you don't see that right in the beginning, but once you do start to see it, and the other thing that you might start to see is something like, flashes of anger. And typically what happens is that, they've been so kind and considerate. And when you see that anger, it's like, oh, well, they must be having a bad day. I mean, we're all very understanding, and we're all very easy, looking to be accommodating and to see the best in somebody. So sometimes we overlook those flashes, and essentially what it is the mask slipping, where you're seeing what's going on behind. So, I mean, even if you don't react right away, you need to make a mental note. If something, seems out of character, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And you need to, look for that entire picture.
Absolutely. I tell people, just document. Like, it doesn't matter if they're good or they're bad. Just keep a journal and be like, it was really strange when John did this tonight. I was a little taken off. I should remember that. It made me feel this way. And then go back to your journal another day. And if those patterns start to come really clearly, that there's too many weird things, then you're in that spot, right? I think what you hit on there, and I wrote it down, was as people start to see these things, narcissists tend to target, sociopath narcissists tend to target people who are giving, caring, generous, and people-pleasing fixers. So if they comment that you don't really load the dishwasher right, or I'd really think the towel should be folded this way, right? Instead of going, oh no, I'll fix the way I folded that towel, you have to get to a point where you are not trying to fix it all. Like, you don't have to change the way you load the dishwasher, especially when you're dealing with a senior sociopath. Well, you've got your own dishwasher, routine and plan here, right? So, right. But it forces the as they, complain, if you would, or comment, it makes the victims want to try harder.
Yes.
Oh, I won't do that again. I won't ever speak up. It didn't work that time. So they hook them more and more slowly with these little tiny digs, and they try to make you change things. So as I just said, some of the characteristics that narcissist sociopaths look for, what are some of the things that they're looking for, the sociopath narcissist is looking for in traits for someone besides being a people pleaser and kind and loving?
Well, they're not necessarily looking for those traits. In fact, one of my colleagues did some research as far as how women get caught up into these relationships. And they were looking specifically at psychopaths, which is all the same genre. And they did research on it. And so what they found was that there were 3 risk factors that made women more likely to end up or attach with a psychopath. And the first was extroversion. Okay. Somebody who likes something, who likes excitement, likes to have a lot of things going on, likes people, someone like that. The second is cooperativeness. In other words, you're somebody who likes to smooth things over and, be accommodating. And the third was investment in relationship, is someone who likes tender moments and likes special moments and things like that. So these are what turned out to be the traits that ended up putting women at risk. Now, they didn't have similar research for men because obviously men can fall into these traps as well. But that's what they found as far as the women were concerned.
That's awesome to hear that, because again, we're always thinking, I'm a people pleaser, I'm a codependent, that's why I get sucked up, right?
Oh, no. Because actually what happens is, this is the way I explain it. There's a 3-step process that sociopaths, narcissists use when they target somebody. First, they meet someone, and first they figure out if this person has anything that they want. Okay. Secondly, they figure out what the person's vulnerabilities are, and everybody has vulnerabilities. If we want something, that makes us vulnerable. Okay. And then the third step is that they use the person's vulnerabilities to get them to give them what they want. And that's what it is, So, and it's not codependency. It's not that there's something wrong with you. This can happen to anybody. I mean, a lot of the people, and I'm sure a lot of people that you talk to, a lot of the people I talk to, they're professionals. They're good. They're on top of their game. They're running a business, and they're raising the kids, and they're superwoman or superman, and they still get stuck in this thing. So it's not necessarily being a people pleaser. It's that everybody has vulnerabilities, and sociopaths are experts at figuring out what your vulnerability is and how to target it.
And what you'll do for them. I mean, there's always you're the supply reason. There's always something that they're looking for, and you've got that, or you can help me with that, boom, boom, boom. And the pieces all start to seem to fall together. I want to talk about a scenario that I know you have so many stories in the book. And honestly, as I read them, my heart was breaking, because I hear them from my clients all the time, but yours were so rich in the way you describe what happened to these people, that it just is going to help a lot of people to hear the examples. I have kind of examples in my book as well, and it really helps people go, oh, that's what it is. But they're heart-wrenching stories, because they're in their last years of their life, and then they get swindled and it all gets taken away. So I have this example that I want to bring up, and I have a person in question, and I'm going to describe it, and we'll see how you think it fits into this, because my friend thinks her mother is being swindled, con man kind of a thing. Her mother's in her 80s, and husband died now 6 months ago. 2 months into her grieving, she meets this man. He's a pillar of the community. Everyone loves him, and he's one of the wealthiest men in town. So don't worry, daughter, he's not after me for my money. So that's the setup to what's going on. But things start to not add up for the daughter. And mother believes that he was married to his wife for 40 something years, and it was a wonderful marriage. And the daughter's hearing rumors going, no, he actually trades sex for like home repairs at the senior center, right? And the mother's like, no, that can't be him. She's in her 80s, right? It's a very vulnerable time. The other things that are part of this story is the love bombing, like crazy over the top restaurants and gifts, and just sucking up all of her time. But then he starts to help her with the finances.
Oh dear.
Within 2 or maybe a month or so after they started dating, starts to talk about living together, but not at her house. Oh no, she should sell her house and move into his house, because he's not going to live anywhere where another man lived, even though he lived there for 50 years, right? He starts to give the financial advice. Again, all of these things that are going on, are indebting her, like, oh, he'll come and he'll fix my house. I can't drive at night. I can't drive really well, so he'll come and pick me up. You don't have to take me to the doctor. I've got this guy, right? So all of this stuff is going on, and the mother is absolutely, no, 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 he's perfect. He's loving. I love him. Like, ignores the daughter, and the other children, just doesn't even talk to them anymore. And
Ugh.
it's absolutely ridiculous. But as I read all of the things in your book, I was like, this is what's going on here. So
Mhm.
does it sound like this is a dangerous situation for this elderly woman?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I actually have quite a few cases like that in the book, where I talk about people who actually, it was their children who contacted me, just like your friend is contacting you, worried about their parents. And yes, I would say that it sounds like the guy is love bombing her. So what do you do in a situation like this? Well, the most important thing to do is to figure out a way to maintain contact, with the mother, because as you mentioned, he's already trying to isolate her, trying to pull her away. Now, the other thing that I would suggest, if they haven't done this already, is that the kids need to be in control of her finances, so maybe they offer to pay the bills, or something along those lines, and make sure that they're the power of attorney, and hopefully this is already set up, because he's probably after her to change the will. I mean, one of the things that I would suggest, and it might not be easy to do, but does this guy really have any money? Maybe he used to have money and maybe it's gone. And, maybe he's gone through his wife's money, who's passed on. And, maybe he doesn't have money anymore. Maybe he lost it all. Maybe he made a bad stock trade or something like that. And his assets are down to nothing. So it could very well be that maybe at one point he had money, but maybe he doesn't anymore. Or maybe the whole thing was a lie all along. And, because typically if the guy or anybody who is a sociopath, and maybe he is a sociopath, I mean, they typically have horrendous credit records, and they don't really have the money or the assets that they say they do. So I'd say that that's a real risk. Not sure. I mean, you could do a credit check, but it's illegal, so if you could figure out a way to,
She'd have to find, he's going to want her social security, but he's not going to share his.
Yes. So, but the main thing I would say is that, first of all, the kids need to, even if they have to bite their tongue, make sure that they maintain contact with mom, because otherwise, the more isolated she is, the more he's going to have control. And then I would certainly see what her documents are, and make sure that they have power of attorney, that they have medical power of attorney. And, because who knows what it's, and even, I mean, it could be that this guy is pushing for marriage, because then he can get a hold of everything as a spouse. And that becomes very tricky, because, on the one hand, she's in love, which is understandable. It's especially true if she had a good marriage, because if she had this nice marriage for 40 or 50 years or something like that, it's hard to imagine that it could be bad, and you want it again, you want the companionship. So the other thing that they should do is make sure that all the kids are on the same page, because another thing that he'll probably try to do is to split them apart, and try and play one against the other, triangulate and things like that. So they all need to make sure that they're talking to each other. I don't know how many kids there are, but if there's other family members, that don't let the guy split you apart, because that's a typical strategy that they will do.
Thank you. And educate the family, right? If you've
Mhm.
got 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, everyone has to learn about this, because if you've had that fairy tale marriage, you can't even possibly imagine that there's con men that are going to hit up an 80-year-old woman, right? Yes, we hear about all those, I forgot what the word is, where they're getting all the old ladies. I've heard that scamming kind of thing, but those might look more scammy. This looks like real love, mom's in love, and nothing anyone's going to say. So educating the whole family is such an important thing, because now they can be like, really from all sides, instead of one single sister going, no mom, that's not it. Because if you are all on the same page, you can bring a little bit more sanity to the case of trying to get mom to see some of this, or at least watch for some of the signs, right? She's not going to just go, oh, okay, I'll just give up the person that I love at 80 and I'll never have someone else. Is that what you want? Right? That's what she's going to do. But if you can slowly just say, watch for this, mom, or, that what he just said, and had you do some, do little chores for him. Those are great, but make it even. Make sure you're being fair about, you do this, he does that, instead of slowly taking on the load of everything.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? I think I remember from your book, keep copies of the birth certificates, the bank accounts, the passwords, things like that often get hijacked, because again, this guy's, I'll help you do your bills. Let me set it up in QuickBooks, and he's got your whole damn life and he's inputting it for you. Right. So to know that you could turn the dial off and go, we've got the passwords, we could lock them out right now, is a lot better than, having him have access. And that's where the money disappears, as you know. So those are some of the important things I remember. The other kind of case that I want to talk about is the narcissistic parent that stops like the family from seeing mom in this example. What can you tell us about that? Can you give us a story or an example of that from your book?
Oh gosh, yes. They'll do that at any age. I remember one of the stories that I included in the book, a woman who was writing about her mother, who was the disordered person, and the sister died. The woman's sister, who they shared the mother, and the woman who sent the story traveled 8 hours to get to the funeral, and she called her mother from 3 minutes away and said, I'll be right there. And the mother demanded that the funeral director close the casket. She wouldn't let her one daughter see the other daughter. It was just like, you just never know what they're going to do. And yes, I've certainly heard of folks who have this problem with parents. Is one of the stories that I remember is that there was a guy who they were married for many years, him and his wife, and the woman had a car accident and she ended up with traumatic brain injury. So, she was fairly incapacitated. So the guy ends up getting in one of these situations where the state government pays him to take care of his wife. So he was making $4,000 a month as her caregiver and locked her in the bedroom for 7 years, and that was it. So, and, I have another friend who had a similar situation where her father and mother were elderly, and the mother was not in a good way, and the father was in charge of her care. Well, he didn't care, and because, I've heard stories. For example, there were people who wrote in and said that, they were much younger, they were in labor and, ready to deliver, and asked the partner to take him to the hospital, and he refused. Okay. So if a guy is going to do this when he's young, is he going to take care of you when you're old, when you're incapacitated? So in a situation like you're talking about, unfortunately, they already are married and they've been together a long time. So, a lot of the things that you could do if they're not married, like getting a hold of the finances and things like that, might not be an option in that situation. So in that case, you might want to try and figure out a way to manipulate the manipulator. And, maybe you figure out, how do you play to his ego? I mean, it's outrageous. He's keeping you from seeing your mom or keeping the family apart or something like that. And you want to, grab him by the throat and shake him. But if he's in the driver's seat, you got to figure out a way to work around it. So maybe you can flatter him, or maybe you can say, well, how about if you go on vacation and I'll watch mom, or something along those lines, or why don't you go out to dinner and I'll take care of mom today, something along these lines. I mean, you actually might have to sweet talk them and, try and figure out a way to play their same games against them, and that it could work, depending on how good you are at it or whatever. But try and figure out what would appeal to them and what you could possibly offer in order to get access to the mom.
Do whatever you have to see them, because leaving mom alone uncared for is not clearly the answer. I think also sometimes reaching out to the lawyer, the family lawyer, making sure that the power of attorney or medical power of attorney, if it's not the senior sociopath dad in this case, doesn't get revoked. Talk to the lawyer. If you're the medical power of attorney, talk to the lawyer and go, if anyone tries to change this, let me know, because mom can't even sign her name. So
Right.
Let's just make sure that all the cards are on the table and the lawyer's aware that this is not what should be happening, because sometimes lawyers get conned into it as well. Maybe they've been their lawyer for 40 years and they'll believe anything they say, but this is end of life stuff. This is choices. And I have had clients that had taken away medical power of attorney and given it to, say, their son.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a woman who was in ICU, and it was actually new husband, older gentleman. He showed up with a fake power of attorney.
Ugh.
Would not let the son visit. Like, he came in with this power of attorney, pretended it was real, and then blocked the real power of attorney kid from coming to see his mother while she was in a coma. Right. I mean, and he spent like a month trying to fight for his right to say, this is really the one. And so knowing that those documents are as solid as they can be, obviously, if they are the power of attorney, there's not much you can do there, except I've heard of going to any hospital where they might be checking into, like, that's near your house, talking to the doctor. Again, they're going to call mom's doctor and making sure that the doctor is aware that if something happens to mom, you get called as well. So you're kind of putting yourself on a call list, because you're not going to get it from dad.
Right. Now, the other thing that you might want to consider is installing one of those little nanny cams or something like that. And they have them now where, I mean, usually we're appalled by this because, people use it to spy on their girlfriends and things like that. But in a case like this, you might need to see what's going on. And, maybe you get one of those little fake things that looks like a keychain or whatever, and just leave it around the house and just see, because, I mean, you may need to know, is the person being abusive, or is your person who's failing, is he or she being neglected? So, I mean, you might need to look into that just to get some evidence. And it may or may not be legal, again, where you are, but you may or may not care, because sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Absolutely. And I know that the Amazon Alexa devices, I hope she doesn't hear me, can drop in. Like, it could be on mom's night table and you could call it and the camera comes on and you could see. So
that would be great. Yeah.
Really good tool. When my dad was dying, we had but we had to get the one with the screen so you could see her and see him, and he could see me. So again, it sort of pop in. It was just, he's in his hospital room and we would just kind of call it in and it would go on because we enabled it on both devices. And it's a lot less, difficult to hide well, that, you know what, it's there. Oh, she's going to listen to a book on tape, Dad. Don't worry, I bought it for Christmas, but it has these other functions that could do that same thing. We need to have evidence. If you're that concerned that your parent is not being cared for, whatever evidence you can gather. And I say, ask for forgiveness after you record.
Yeah.
Was I not supposed to do that? It's just what you've got to do to protect your parent. So are there anything that we missed that we need to explain? Did we cover everything here?
As far as
both the
scenario,
romantic or the elderly?
Yeah, well, there's one thing that I should talk a little bit about what I found with this research. And as I said, one of the things that I did is ask a lot of questions of my survey respondents. And one of the questions that I asked was whether or not they knew the person both before and after age 50. And 40% of the survey respondents did. And then I asked about what was their behavior like before and after age 50. Well, 91% of the survey respondents said that their manipulation, deceit, and antisocial behavior was just as bad or worse after age 50 than it was before age 50. So that's the documentation that proves that if people have these personality disorders, they're not going to change. They are not going to get better. And this is really important to understand, because if you're involved in a situation like this, whether it's a romantic partner or it's your parent or a family member, you don't want to be waiting for years and years and years, hoping and praying that this person is going to mellow out, because they're not. So this is the message that I want to get across to people, that if you have a senior sociopath in your life, someone who's distorted and has these exploitative tendencies, they're not going to change. So you need to know this, and you need to say to yourself, how do I want to live the rest of my life? And if you're married to this person, do you want to get to the point where you're in a wheelchair and you're dependent on them and knowing that they're not going to care for you? Or if this is your parent, when are you going to have your own life? And, if it's a boss, are you going to stay there, hoping that this person's going to mellow out and change, or do you move on and find another job? So the important thing is that they do not change, and knowing that, what steps are you going to take for yourself?
Perfect. We know that sociopaths and narcissists don't like it when you're sick. They don't like to take care of people, right? It is just fundamentally what it's supposed to be about, me, not you, right? So when they get older, it's scary. You were talking, and I wrote down a word of nursing homes. My mom was in a nursing home, and I got really friendly with the nurses, and she never left her room, so she wasn't affected. But the nursing station people would tell me that there were predators that were coming and sort of like manipulating people that live there, and that it's a very hard thing if your parent could be being abused in a nursing home, or financially abused because they live down the hall. There's so many different ways. Do you have that in the book as well? I don't remember.
Oh, yes. I have several case studies of people who were in assisted living situations. And in fact, one of the stories was about this woman whose both her parents lived in the assisted living center, and the mother passed away. Well, within a couple of months, just like your friend, this woman comes trotting down the hall, trying to make friends with the father, who was there. And he had been married for 42 years. He was heartbroken. And she started moving in on him and, just taking control of him, to the point where, this is the type of situation in this assisted living place where all the meals were taken care of, and that, that was all paid for. Well, she insisted that he take her out for meals all the time. So now he's spending all this money when he could be eaten for free, in the assisted living. Plus, when they are there, if they're walking down the hall and somebody comes towards them, the woman was like dragging him, going off in another direction. So she was isolating him from all his friends that were in the facility. And it got to the point where the family, the daughter and their brothers and sisters figured out what was going on, and they actually had to move him to another facility because there was no way to stop what was going on, with this woman who lived there.
Mhm. Wow, this is like so earning the badge of you can't make this shit up. I mean, the stories we both have heard are just over the top and yet oddly similar. Like they
Yes.
deviate a little bit, but like it's almost like they have a big book to follow the rules and they just know, oh, I'm 50, I'll be this kind of a jerk now. It just seems like they learn, and of course they're always learning what they can get away with a victim, but they learn and they adapt and become more wicked as they get older. Can you share with me how people can find you? And we'll both hold up our books again.
Yes, we have a book like this right here, right? Yep.
This is coming
Right.
out. What is the date that it will be launched?
May 17th. Although ebooks are available on Amazon now for pre-order. And then after the launch date, softcover books and hardcover books will be available on Amazon, and also other places. Love Fraud, my website, lovefraud.com. We can get them there too. And then through other channels, iBooks, where all the ebooks are distributed, all those places, wherever you get them. So it will be available everywhere, and lots of good information. And I especially like the last two chapters about dealing with senior sociopaths. Like one of the people who experienced this with the elderly woman moving in on their father. I mean, she wrote an extensive list of tips to help people who are in this situation. And then other people talked about their experiences and how they dealt with it and then how they recovered from it. So there's lots and lots of good information that will help people to understand what they're dealing with and how to extricate themselves from these situations.
It's an amazing book, and as all of yours have been that I've read, but this is just like there's nothing out there on senior sociopaths, senior narcissists, and this is going to change a lot of people's lives because they are struggling to know, what do I do now? What happens? So thank you for writing this book. It's really needed in the community, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Tracy, I appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome. Wasn't she great? I just love her. One thing I just remembered and I forgot to talk about when we were chatting was the decision to go no contact. This often comes into the scenario, specifically if it's a family member where you just can't take it anymore, or the cruelty that they are inflicting on everyone around them becomes something where you have to self-love to walk away from your family because you can't handle the senior narcissist. So if you are deciding to go no contact with a narcissist or sociopath in this case, I want to bring this up. This is my processing going no contact journal, and it has all of these pages with choices, with words, with instructions, things for you to think about. Going no contact with a family member is not an easy decision. And if you don't think through the different scenarios, what am I going to do if, and what happens when? If you don't think about these things, and I've outlined them and told you what to think about here, and then the rest of the book is a big journal that you can put all of the things in and process it in one place. So if you're thinking about going no contact with your narcissist, please pick up this book. It's on Amazon.com. You can also find it on my website, narcissistabusesupport.com. So thank you, Donna, for a great interview and educating us about senior sociopaths. And find Donna on her website, lovefraud.com. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next time.